Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good afternoon, everyone. Phil Penarski here with the News 8 Live Desk. Hope you're having a great day so far. Well, believe it or not, we are 136 days away from the general election happening this November. We're even closer to the primary election here in Michigan coming later on in August. And one of the seats that will be up this year is Senator Debbie Stabenow's Senate seat. The longtime senator announced that she would be retiring and not seeking re-election, which means that there are currently 6 individuals up for that seat on the Democratic and Republican side of things. And our very own Rick Albin joins us now. He just finished speaking with all 6 of those candidates, and he's going to be bringing you all of those conversations on to the point over the next couple of weeks. And we're going to be taking a sneak peek, I guess, sort of into what those conversations were all about. Rick, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, it's my pleasure. And you know, when you talk about how close these elections are in time proximity, the absentee ballots, for no reason absentee, will go out next week. Mm-hmm. So people will actually start voting in this race in the next 2 weeks. Yeah. And I think one of the important things that we've discovered through polling is that when we looked at least at the Republican side, 54% of the people asked were undecided. And I extrapolate from that many people just don't know who's running, don't know who the candidates are. And so over the next 3 weeks, we'll feature all 6 of those candidates with the goal of giving people a better informed idea, a better informed choice when you go to the polls. And I think that it'll be important for people to meet each of these candidates while they're being asked essentially questions, not the same question, but about the same subjects, and kind of get the differences between the 2 Democrats, because you'll either be voting in the Democratic primary, or the 4 Republicans, because you'll vote on the Republican side of the ballot. And a reminder, you cannot cross across when you do that. So you have to pick a side, pick your lane as it is, and stay in.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, that kind of leads perfectly into that first question, getting everybody to sort of know who these candidates are. A few of them I think people are probably familiar with or have at least heard the name, but some of them maybe not. And so, Rick, that first question to you, I mean, tell us a little bit more about each one of these candidates that are up.
Yeah, in the very briefest terms, you have 4 people in the Republican race that include Dr. Sherry O'Donnell. She's a surgeon. She also does medical aid work. She's been to 35 countries. She's a pastor. She is certainly going to be a grassroots favorite. She is from Stevensville, Michigan, and she will talk about everything from the economy to foreign conflicts that the United States is involved in to electric vehicles. So we ask questions about a lot of these subjects. She'll be weighing in on that. Sandy Pensler, who is a businessman from the east side of the state, will also be talking about those subjects, as will Justin Amash. Justin is a former congressman from West Michigan that people are very familiar with. He at one point left the Republican Party, looked at the possibility of maybe doing a run as a libertarian for president, but has since decided he's going to run as a Republican for the U.S. Senate seat. And then Mike Rogers, who I think is on the screen right now, another former U.S. congressman. He was there's Sandy Pensler there. Rogers was head of the House Intelligence Committee. He's worked for the FBI, and he has been around for a while. And then on the Democratic side, and you just saw them a moment ago, activist, actor Hill Harper, and U.S. Congressman Alyssa Slotkin. Those will be your 2 choices on that side. And what I think is interesting is that when you look at Rogers and Slotkin, they've got pretty good name ID out there among the folks who are paying attention. But again, I don't think that's a whole lot of people. I mean, I think maybe fully half of the people who may vote in this election have not yet engaged, because it does feel so early on. But we also know that as many as 50% of all of those people that will cast votes will probably do it in early voting. That's been kind of the trend. So getting these folks out there and letting people know who they are, I think will be instructive. And it'll just be interesting to see, because I think that even though, as you point out, Phil, some of these names are maybe a little more recognizable, we know for a fact that none of them are polling over 50%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and again, I kind of want to shift back and kind of let everybody know, again, as we do approach these, election dates and important dates to really remember for both the primary and the general election. I mean, we want people to kind of understand who they're voting for, get a little bit closer look, which is what you're going to be doing on To The Point. And again, those are going to be happening over the next couple of weeks. So highly encourage everybody to go there. And you also said that maybe they're not the same questions you asked every single candidate, but they were the same topics.
Yeah,
they
same
roughly
topics.
focused on those. Can you just touch on some of those topics so people know what to
Yeah.
kind of expect these candidates to be talking about during To The Point?
Well, I suspect most people sitting at home right now or listening on whatever device that they're listening on could choose some of those subjects, because we looked at what we hear from our viewers as well as our polling, and the number one issue for voters, whether it's in the U.S. Senate race or if it's in a race for president or other races across the board, is about the economy and inflation. And the part of that question that is the toughest is that no member of the U.S. Senate, no president, no person can fix either one of those things. But I ask what they would advocate. What would the process be? How would they work with their peers to try to do something to make the everyday cost of living easier for families, particularly working families in this country, that have seen a lot of their budget disappear just into higher prices. They're not buying more, they're not being extravagant, they just don't have the money, the disposable cash they once did. So that's a very important topic. We talked to everybody about that. We also talked a little bit about America's involvement in foreign conflicts. Right now on two fronts, in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, the United States is heavily involved in both what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on with Israel and Gaza. And particularly in Israel and Gaza, I think that we are conflicted a little bit about which direction we need to go. We've been trying to broker a deal. That hasn't gone particularly well, not being able to get Hamas to sign on board. In Ukraine, we've provided weapons, but we've also provided some restrictions. So there are real questions about what that involvement looks like, and I got a pretty big, wide variety of answers on that particular subject. And then, of course, we talk a little bit about immigration, and everybody's got a different take there. And there are a number of other subjects, but I'm not going to spoil the whole show. But suffice to say that each of these candidates came very well armed to discuss these things. And again, they did not know what the questions were in advance, but you could probably, it's as I always tell people, if we're going to do a mass questioning is what I call this. So a number of candidates at different times getting the same subjects asked, or if you're going to do a debate, we never tell people what we're going to ask them.
Right.
But common sense suggests you're going to take the top issues of the day, the top things that people are concerned about as a voter, and those are the things that we try to convey. So anyway, I was very pleased with the conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think one thing I'm really interested to see out of these conversations is see how the different candidates in each party sort of answer it and maybe differ a little bit. But I do want to take a step back from the party lines and maybe kind of focus on another grouping that I noticed when going through the candidates, was that we have a couple of lifelong politicians or experienced politicians, I would say, and then a couple of outsiders, people that have never necessarily held public office before. When you were doing these interviews and talking to them, did you notice any sort of trend between those two groups on how they kind of approach either these conversations or the election itself?
I think I could go back over the past 40 years and talking to politicians and say almost as a universal matter, that people who have never held office before are either tacitly or overtly critical of people that they call lifetime politicians, or people that have worked for the government all of their life. So you heard that a couple of times, but I don't think there was a really big focus on that, because, I mean, the fact of the matter is many of these people have been involved or in the political sphere, so it's not like I would guess Dr. O'Donnell comes the closest as being one who was kind of the first time on the statewide stage, but the rest of them have had experience from time to time, so they've all gotten their feet wet in politics.
Mm-hmm. And we touched on, obviously, the polling was super interesting, kind of leading up to these conversations as well. Just seeing that a lot of people are still kind of undecided in a lot of the races, but some polling did suggest that Representative Alyssa Slotkin and former Representative Mike Rogers were two of the probable favorites in both parties' elections. But we're definitely gonna have to wait and see until August to see how that really plays out.
Yeah,
but
I think that. I mean, I think that's indicative of name ID. I mean,
right.
Slotkin's been out campaigning actively for over a year, and Rogers has certainly been in the news. He started out talking about something like finding an independent to run for president, and that kind of got him on the map, and then he kind of shifted into this race for Senate. So while, yes, I think they both have party support, certainly Slotkin has gotten a lot of endorsements and a lot of party money, and I think over on the Republican side, Mike Rogers has been endorsed by Donald Trump, an endorsement that I think some Trump supporters may not agree with, as evidenced by some of what I've seen and heard. But so I think they are obviously a couple of the names that are recognized in this race. But as you say, we'll see how that plays out, because hopefully in 3 weeks from Sunday or Saturday, all 6 of these will have some exposure so people can see them, know who they are, make an informed decision. And we'll see too as it goes on, because even though voting starts very soon, there's still a lot of campaigning to go, and candidates have opportunities to either convince people to vote for them or to make some kind of a mistake on the campaign trail. All of that could play into it too.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, again, we're very much looking forward to these. I do have one last question for you. I mean, this may be a little bit hard to kind of figure out or really even answer, but given the fact that Michigan is once again going to be a huge player in the general election. I know everybody's focused in on the presidential election between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Everybody's going to be kind of focusing on Michigan over the next couple of weeks if they haven't already started paying close attention to everything going on. And we will potentially see the winner of this Senate race kind of announced before the winner for the presidential election. If that happens, say there's a big landslide victory for one party, or maybe it was close and we know a few hours before the presidential election is called here in Michigan, do you see that playing at all any factor in potentially swaying one side, or maybe seeing a path for one of the presidential candidates based off what we see in the Senate race?
Traditionally, you think of the top of the ticket of having coattails, and so if a presidential nominee was doing well in the state, you might expect for that candidate for U.S. Senate, for example, to be doing well in that state. However, polling over the past 3 months suggests just the opposite, not just in Michigan, but in a number of these very key battleground states. But I say that with a codicil, and that is that it is too close to see any kind of a trend. For example, I think former President Trump is leading President Biden by 1 point in the latest poll here in Michigan. Well, that's a lead, but we also know that statistically that makes it very, very close, and the day of a vote can change a 1 percentage point lead, or lagging 1 percentage point. So that's very, very close. On the other hand, in the Senate race, in a hypothetical head-to-head, Slotkin, the Democrat, is slightly ahead of Rogers by about the same percentage point. So it doesn't really track, right? But one of the reasons that's the case is because those numbers are so close, and there are variables in there. So I think what we're looking at, and you said something, if we had a landslide for one side or the other. I'm sitting here going into July thinking there's no such thing as a landslide in 2024.
Right.
Now, with that said, please don't record this because it's 4.5 months before the election, and anything can happen. Right now, this is as close as I've ever seen a presidential race, and it's unique because the nominees have been set from the get-go. I mean, there were a few Republican debates, but for all intent and purposes, Donald Trump has been the nominee, Joe Biden's the nominee, and the convention's still a couple of weeks away for Republicans.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Rick, again, very much looking forward to the point episodes coming up over the next couple of weeks, as we always are, to see them every single week. But these ones in particular for this Senate race, again, all the candidates are going to be interviewed over the next 3 weeks. People are going to be able to hear from the candidates themselves in their interviews with Rick. And again, they will all be shown live onto the point, and then you can also catch recaps of them over on our website, woodtv.com.
I should mention, I hate to interrupt you, Phil, but
Okay.
I forgot to mention a moment ago. These shows are unique in that we interviewed everybody individually, and nobody had a time limit. We simply said, let's answer these questions. We, of course, do have time limits on television, and so not all questions and answers from each candidate will be on those shows because we simply don't have enough time. But the great news is all of the questions and answers, the entire content of those conversations for each candidate will be at woodtv.com. So after the shows air, you can go to woodtv.com and see the parts that we edited out. And just to be clear, what we edit out is strictly for time at the end of the show. So we'll go into the middle of an answer and make the edit, and then all of that content will be on woodtv.com, so you'll be able to hear all of it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for pointing that out, Rick. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be wanting to check that out. And again, it's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks, so you'll have multiple chances to be able to check out these interviews and then be sure to know what you're doing before you head on off to the polls. So definitely going to want to check those out. Rick, thank you so much for stopping by. We look forward to seeing the first one of those.
All right, thanks.
Of course, I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the News 8 Live Desk. I'm Phil Pinarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.